the Linux Foundation. $250 million comes into this foundation every single year. So that's billion with a B. $250 million every year from big tech corporations to control the Linux Foundation. And the Linux Foundation has a mandatory DEI training and certification class that you have to take if you want to have certain levels of involvement with the Linux Foundation or any of the foundations that they own, which is just a mountain of them at this point. And that training orientation focuses on things like Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, seriously, pronouns, critical race theory, micro-inequities, the usage of just the right or wrong words, and of course, DEI. Now, what's interesting here is the President of the United States just signed an executive order which prohibits the DEI stuff from happening in any federal government organization. And many of those organizations, including the Department of Defense, do significant amounts of work with the Linux Foundation and their sub-foundations, what I'm going to go into in a moment. What is that going to be like? Is the Linux Foundation going to stop requiring this mandatory DEI training? Well, as of right now, they have not. And based on the wording of the executive order in question and how all of this works together, it may mean that significant government agencies may no longer be able to work with the Linux Foundation. All right, let's go into this. Oh, by the way, I just want to make this clear. That's my certificate right there. Right there. I took the course. The Linux Foundation hereby certifies that Brian Lunduke has successfully completed inclusive open source community orientation. I am certified in DEI, guys. I'm a DEI certified guy. This is real. I have a badge for it now because the Linux Foundation has gamified the entire thing. So congratulations on a badge well earned for the inclusive open source community orientation. So I have a badge. I'm a badge. I'm like a sheriff. I'm basically the DEI sheriff now. Now, if you go to various sub-foundations of the Linux Foundation, including the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which deals with technologies related to hosting server things in the cloud, Kubernetes and those sorts of things, right? They have subgroups. Inside the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, there are community groups, which are run by individuals, employees at various companies, as well as people working for the United States federal government running these organizations on behalf of their teams inside the United States federal government. There's a ton of these organizations, huge numbers of them. And in order to run one of these sub-organizations, you must take this mandatory DEI training from the Linux Foundation. So this is the training course. I took it. You can take it yourself. Just search for inclusive open source community orientation, and you can rock out with it. Now, it was a collaboration. This whole thing was put together by a collaboration between the Linux Foundation and the National Center for Women and Information Technology. It is to provide you with essential background knowledge and practical skills to promote inclusivity in your online and in-person cultures. This entails recognizing, appreciating, and including people of different races, ethnicities, genders, ages, abilities, and other identity categories. Now, the national, or was it, sorry, I make sure I get this right. What was the name of them again? The National Center for Women and Information Technology. Yes, the NCWIT, NCWIT. .org. If you try and look them up online, you're going to get a mixed bag of results. For example, their social media platforms are by and large locked down. Their X account is closed, locked, protected. So you can't interact with them. You can't browse through their past tweets because they don't want you knowing about their past tweets. Okay. Luckily, if you go to their website, including in the archived versions of them, you can find a whole mountain of blog posts that tell you what they're really about and what it seems like it's about. Just from me reading their blog posts is about reducing the number of women in technology and replacing those women with men dressed as women. That's what it seems like. I'm not saying that as a criticism of them. I'm saying that that's what it seems like their goal is. I'm going to read this title of this blog post to you that I found on NCWIT.org. This is their website. This is one of their main blog posts. And I'm going to read this title to you right now. And I want to ask your forgiveness, nay, beg your forgiveness in advance for what I am about to read to you. It is going to cause your brain to hemorrhage in places you did not know you even had brain. Quote, transgender experience in the workplace, comma, the most gender-balanced computing program, comma, mentorship and male allies, comma, technology and sexuality. Now, you may be asking to yourself, what did he just read to me? And I couldn't tell you. I read through the blog post. I read through, it's mostly about transgender experiences in the workplace and how transgender, specifically men dressed as women, is real important. You can't have apparently a computer company without men dressed as women, according to this organization. But the rest of it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It seems to be mostly about sex, sexuality, men dressed as women. I don't know. But the Linux Foundation partnered with this organization, which seems focused on that, to create this mandatory DEI training. So who is this course for? Well, according to them, quote, this course is for everyone involved or looking to become involved in open source software communities. By the end of this course, you will gain essential background knowledge and skills to promote inclusivity, diversity, and equality in open source communities. See, I want to point this out because this is really important. The point of this is to promote DEI. They say it right there, promote DEI. They repeat it throughout this course, how important it is to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion over and over and over and over again. The promoting DEI is the critical part of all of this. And the first section of 3 short modules in this course is called The Case for Diversity. Here we will briefly explain what diversity means. I'm sorry. I just had a flash of a later part in it, and it made me laugh. But now I'm laughing at something that you're not. Here we will briefly examine what diversity means, the differences between diversity and inclusion, and how both relate to systemic racism and sexism. Blah 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 blah. And then they have slide after slide about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how DEI is important, and gender identity and gender expression, and blah blah blah, over and over and over again. Why is creating inclusive cultures important? The importance of diversity and inclusion typically falls into 2 main categories, the social justice case or the business case. And they make it very clear that the purpose of this for promoting DEI is social justice. Over and over again, they talk about this. They say, quote, and this is great, a historic opportunity at this moment in time, a clear, urgent call to action for everyone, powerful reasons for hope. And on each of these slides that I'm going through right now, for those of you listening to the audio version, I'm reading the important stuff to you, so you don't need to look at it if you don't want to. But on each of these slides, they have an audio clip that you can play that goes along with it. And some of them were boring as all snot and just read the text on the screen. This one, I'm not going to play it for you because I don't know what I'm allowed to play. It's technically copyrighted the Linux Foundation, but you guys can just go check it out for yourself. This one talks specifically about George Floyd, how the great George Floyd was so horribly treated. And Black Lives Matter was so great. And yeah, they're burning down all the cities and torching police stations and attacking federal courthouses and hurting people, and people are dying. But isn't it great? Because it's BLM and it's social justice, so it's so great. That literally is their whole point. I read through these things, I listened to every little scrap of audio, and it seemed to be BLM is great, Black Lives Matter is great, riots in the name of social justice is necessary and wonderful. It gives us powerful reasons for hope and a call to action and at this historic moment in time because George Floyd is wonderful. That literally seems to be the point of this. Now, many of you are sitting there right now thinking, great, Lunduke, awesome. But what does this have to do with Linux or open source or any of these things? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but they require that you take this certification course to agree on how great George Floyd is, and to agree that you need to promote DEI and burn down cities in the name of BLM, or you can't be part of any Linux Foundation organization. It's mandatory. Gender diversity improves innovation. Here's kind of a fun one. Gender diversity, they just put this chart in here showing that the more women you have in a group, the more the collective intelligence of a group increases, to the point where if you get all completely full of women, the intelligence shoots through the roof and becomes a light bulb. I think they're saying men are dumb. I think that's the whole point, and that having only women in a group makes it smarter. I think that's what they're saying in the chart. It's a little ridiculous. All right, let's talk about barriers to inclusion. Institutional barriers and bias systems, policies and practices, and systems that explicitly or implicitly disadvantage groups of people based on social identities, race and gender and sexual orientations and the like. They talk about this sort of thing a bit. They also talk about intersectionality because you can't have a good DEI presentation without talking about intersectionality. In the second section, they talk about unconscious bias, racism, and sexism. And they talk about hidden and not so hidden forms of racism and sexism. Okay, great. Let's talk about bias, racism, and sexism. Lay it on me, Linux Foundation. They're talking about Black Lives Matter again. Again, it's about Black Lives Matter, including multiple slides of statements from companies and organizations about how great Black Lives Matter is. Like this one from the NFL. The NFL team is greatly saddened by the tragic events across our country. The protesters' reaction to these incidents reflect the pain, anger, and frustration that so many of us feel. Our deepest condolences go out to the family of Mr. George Floyd. Okay, not going to read any more because I don't want to throw it up in my mouth too much. So they have multiple things like this about how great this is. Now, does this have anything to do with Linux at this point? Open source, any of it? No. You'll notice I'm condensing this a lot, and we still haven't gotten to anything even remotely related to what this foundation does. Oh, and here's one about driving while black. Okay. Is there anything to do with software in here? Nope. A Cornell University Law School study, quote, Driving While Black, compiled by Charlie Brown. Just to make this clear, I'm not making fun of anyone by saying that Charlie Brown made this Driving While Black study. That's actually the person's name. I'm moving on. All right, here we go. Micro-Inequities. This one I was laughing at earlier because I love the idea of micro-inequities. We've all heard of microaggressions, which is in and of itself insane and stupid. Microaggressions. But micro-inequities it's just one of the most ridiculous things I've heard of in a long time. I'm going to read a few quotes to you. All of these are quotes that are examples of micro-inequities according to the Linux Foundation. You should never say these phrases. Here we go. Actually, Brenda has a good idea. Can't say that. So sorry, Brenda, your ideas suck. Quote, are you in the right group or meeting? End quote. So you can't say that. If someone's in the wrong group or in the wrong meeting, you can't tell them that because that's a micro-inequity. How about you take the lead on design or UI? There will be no leads on design or UI. Anyone who is leading design or UI of software is experiencing micro-inequities. Quote, we decided on the right architecture at the Friday beer bash. End quote. Now, I'm not 100% certain what the micro-inequity is there. I don't know if it's at that people went to a Friday beer bash. That could be a micro-inequity. Or that they decided on the right architecture. That seems like a micro-inequity. I don't really know. They then move on. Here are phrases to avoid when talking to or addressing a female audience. Just going to read a few of these to you. Are you here with your boyfriend? Are you a designer? As a developer, hearing you can design the UI. You do realize you are the only girl, right? Leave it to the woman to try to clean the hackerspace. You do the writing, designing. You'd be better than us guys. This is how you should feel. Do you know what this thing is? I didn't think it was offensive, or you shouldn't be offended by the thing I said. Are you on design, or are you a PM? Someone talking through a woman as if they don't exist. Or my favorite, you're just a freaking girl. Sorry, there's a bunch more. They have a whole list of examples of things that you're not allowed to say to women. And you know what? Here's the thing. Some of the things on the list are a little ridiculous. Like, why would you say that? You're just a freaking girl. I can't imagine the scenario where someone says that to a woman that's not their friend, and said as a kind of like a joke, right? Like, come on, you freaking girl. Sort of like when we talk to our male friends and be like, you know, here's a girly man. I don't know. It's kind of the same thing in my mind. But you know, some of them, sure. I mean, some of them are a bit rude. Some of them kind of don't make any sense to be an insult at all. And I think if you took them as insulting, that's more just a personal issue. Like literally, like, oh, are you the designer on the project? I don't see that as an issue. Okay, moving on. Third and final module of the course is called Making Change. Now, again, they give you a whole bunch of stuff, mostly about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and microaggressions and things you can't say to people, things you're not allowed to say to men that are dressed as women. But they end everything with making change, right? Here we will examine several research-based ways to deal with biases associated with racism and sexism, including interventions when you see bias, as well as proactive practices that promote greater inclusivity. So the whole point of this is to promote DEI all the way through, continuing to promote DEI, implement change personally and systematically, right? About how these biases we have, they need a response, and we have to recognize them and change them. It must happen. You must change who you are, what you think. You must change the system. You cannot use certain words, not at all. I mean, there's just lists and lists of words you can't use. And one of the ways that they really promote this heavily is through the promotion of a code of conduct. They call this codes of conduct can make a difference. They can raise awareness and secure buy-in for a code of conduct. You should raise awareness and secure buy-in for a code of conduct. You should call out and sanction people who in more overt or abusive conduct. If they don't like the code of conduct, you should sanction them. You should call them out. You should attack them, right? Over and over again. And then you should try to get moderators involved to moderate people, to keep them from talking about problems with the code of conduct, right? Right. Censor people who don't like the code of conduct, promote people who like the code of conduct. This seems to be the strategy promoted by the Linux Foundation. And what's fascinating here is you see this strategy in play throughout the open source world, whether it's an OpenSUSE or NixOS or one Linux distribution after another. This same strategy, install a specific custom designed code of conduct, install moderators inside the system, and make it a violation of the code of conduct to criticize the code of conduct or the people who installed the code of conduct, and remove the dissenting voices. That is advocated for openly by the Linux Foundation, and it is a strategy actively used. Now, this is not, my apologies for those of you watching the video version. I wanted to make sure you understood where this strategy comes from in large part. I really am sorry about that. The code of conduct that they're specifically talking about is the Contributor Covenant Code of Conduct. Now, the Contributor Covenant Code of Conduct was custom designed by a gentleman named Corey MK. Corey also goes by Coraline and sometimes thinks that he's a lady. The picture on the screen is a picture of Corey MK. Corey MK wrote the Contributor Code of Conduct, as well as the Post-Meritocracy Manifesto. Manifesto, where Corey talks at length about how meritocracy is a bad thing, that people should not be judged on their works, they should be judged on what their sexual orientation and identity are, and that's it. Corey MK promotes an extreme version of DEI, right? I mean, DEI by itself is already quite extreme. The version of DEI that Corey MK promotes is ludicrously extreme. And Corey MK engages in these very strange efforts to ban and blacklist anyone who disagrees with those DEI efforts, including anyone who is not actively pro-trans or just simply attacking non-trans programmers or non-leftists. Just to give you an example, you can go find her website, his website, her website, whatever, at the about the Post-Meritocracy Manifesto by Googling it and read it. It is... I'll just read the first line to you here. Meritocracy is a founding principle of the open source movement, and the ideal of meritocracy is perpetuated throughout our field in the way people are recruited, hired, retained, promoted, and valued. But meritocracy has consistently shown itself to mainly benefit those with privilege to the exclusion of underrepresented people in technology. The idea of merit is in fact never clearly defined, blah, 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 and he goes on to talk about how essentially merit is really, really bad. He's written articles about the dehumanizing myth of meritocracy, about how what you do is bad, I guess, and the only thing that's important is whether or not you're a guy that puts on a dress. And all of this sits under an organization that he created. It's really just a website called the Organization for Ethical Source. And the idea here is it's open source software with a license that is open source, but with additional licensing restrictions put upon it to enforce extreme political agendas like the DEI political agendas that we've just walked through. Just to give you one example, Corey has a tendency to go around finding anyone involved in open source projects, finding them on Twitter or Facebook or in a forum, making any sort of a statement that is not pro-trans, hunting down every project that person is ever involved with, tangentially, leadership position, anything, and actively advocating for that person to be banned and blacklisted from those projects. I've got a screenshot up here right now where Corey is attacking someone who he's calling transphobic and they should be removed from the project. This is an ongoing thing, right? It's an actively hostile, attacking other people thing. The whole purpose of Corey MK's contributor code of conduct is to attack people that he disagrees with on this DEI woke-ish stuff. That's the whole purpose. And the fact that the Linux Foundation has not only adopted it, but is encouraging it and requiring training around it is deeply disturbing. And it really makes a lot of sense when you look at what's happening within the open source world. That's what's happening, right? These sorts of problems are perpetuating themselves because the Linux Foundation is training people to enact these sort of guerrilla warfare against just normal average folks. That's really what's going on here. They go on in this particular training program to talk about inclusive language tips. Consider your content from many perspectives. Avoid jargon. Okay. Avoid he, she, and you pronouns. So don't use he, she, or you. Man, you can't use you. You're not supposed to say the word you. Oh, so what do you think about that? Oh, I can't say that. I say, hey, Dave, what do you think about using C++ over C? I can't say that because I use the word you in it. Well, I don't think he would like that very much. Oh, shoot, I said he just now. Oh, darn it. So you can't say those things. And you have to avoid stereotypes. Okay. All right, fine. You have to use the proper wording, not just in pronouns, but things like inclusive naming. So master or slave, you can't use that. You have to use primary or secondary. You can't use the phrase blacklist, the word blacklist. You have to use deny list. You can't say man hours. You have to say engineer hours. You can't say, oh, I put a dummy value in there. No. You have to use the word placeholder value. You can't say it's so simple your mother can do it. You have to say user friendly. Okay. Great. Let's word police everything to death. But if you agree to word police everything, you do get this certificate, which certified that I, Brian Lunduke, have successfully completed the inclusive open source community orientation and got my badge. Now, here's the thing. Most of what's in this training, most of it, is not allowed within the federal government anymore. After the executive orders that have come down by President Trump in the first few days of office, it is no longer allowed within the federal government. They're not allowed to have DEI offices, DEI employees. They're not allowed to work on these DEI things. All right. This came down ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. Well, that runs completely against. It's a totally opposite direction from where the Linux Foundation is trying to go with this. The Linux Foundation, the whole purpose of this is anti-meritocracy, right? That's clearly the whole point. Against meritocracy, promote illegal discrimination, take away merit-based opportunity from people. That's where the Linux Foundation is going. They're promoting DEI. And they're really promoting it heavily in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, among other areas throughout the Linux Foundation. I just wanted to focus on this one right now because the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is getting very large. It has 263,000 contributors across 195 projects sitting within this foundation. It's large. And one of those groups that uses those projects heavily and directly works with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is the U.S. Department of Defense. In fact, on the website for the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the Department of Defense is a case study. The Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprise, the Department of Defense CIO, created the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps reference design with a mandate to use the Cloud Native Computing Foundation compliant Kubernetes clusters and other open source technologies across the Department of Defense, end quote. So what happens? I mean, what happens now going forward? This raises so many questions. After reading through this whole thing, after taking this course, after becoming certified, I have a lot of questions. First, what does social justice have to do with programming operating system kernels? What does that have to? What does that have to do there? I don't. What does it have to do with Kubernetes? What does it have to do with open source, cloud native, whatever? I don't know. I have no idea at all. It really never explained that. It really never, despite slide after slide and little audio clip after audio clip, truly, and I clicked every link. I went through every little reference link they had. I looked up every word because I couldn't find anything where it really showed me why it's important for operating system kernels and the people working on it to agree to actively promote social justice campaigns involving intersectionality, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, critical race theory, micro-inequities, anti-meritocracy, pronoun usage, and inclusive naming. Why? Whoa, seriously? Seriously? Even if the federal government hadn't come down and banned all these things, because duh. Even if that hadn't happened, this stuff is going to alienate the majority of people who might think about becoming a part of the Linux Foundation, becoming a part of any of this, using some of these technologies. It's going to alienate organizations. It's going to alienate governments. It's going to alienate individual developers and sysadmins. It's a bad idea. They're so far from focusing on the software. It's absolutely asinine. And they're doing all of this instead of spending more money and time and effort building software, working on Linux. Only 2% of what they bring in goes towards Linux. 2% of that $250 million. And what happens now? that the DEI is banned in the US government organizations. The DoD is working with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and multiple subgroups of it on multiple projects. And they're not the only branch of the United States government that's doing so. And multiple companies have individuals organizing those projects and organizations within that foundation. And those companies do contracts for the United States government. I'm seeing a potential problem here. I'm seeing a big potential problem, and I don't know which way it's going to go. Now, I reached out to the Linux Foundation to see what they're thinking of this in light of these executive orders coming down, in light of DEI being abandoned by many corporations because it's illegal and people are getting sued out of the wazoo because of these DEI programs because they're crazy illegal, they're crazy racist, and they're just awful. And the government is banning it outright. People are getting fired for even thinking about promoting it. Is the Linux Foundation going to double down? Are they so committed to DEI policies over the success of Linux? So for them, is DEI so much more important than Linux to them that they're willing to continue doubling down on DEI? I don't know. I asked. I haven't heard anything back. I've waited. Nothing. But that's not unusual. They don't respond to critical press. I've yet to see them respond to critical press in years. I've asked, what can you do? There's nothing more I can do. I can't force them to talk. It's absolutely wild what's going on here. But this sort of mandatory training is happening across the Linux Foundation. It's having a profound impact on massive portions of open source in a very negative way. We're seeing projects crumble and collapse because of it. And now we may see multiple government agencies no longer able to work with the Linux Foundation because of it. And it's entirely possible that some of these companies that do military contracts, for example, and government contracts may no longer be able to work with the Linux Foundation in the long term because of it. Will the Linux Foundation double down? I'm curious. I want to know. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers for allowing me the honor of being certified, of getting my inclusive open source community orientation certification. I am now a fully licensed and certified DEI master. So if you have any questions about DEI, I'm certified. I've got a badge. Go to lunduke.com, click on links, watch the shows, listen to the shows, read my shenanigans, become a tech whistleblower. It's all there at lunduke.com. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.